March 28, 193 AD, the marble halls of the imperial palace on the Palatine Hill are not a sanctuary, they are about to become a tomb. Outside, the air is thick with menace. 200 soldiers, maybe more, are marching. These are not barbarians at the gates, they are the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's own bodyguards. Their armor glints under the Roman sun, their swords are drawn, their loyalty, it turns out, is for sale. For 87 days, one man has dared to believe he could save Rome from itself. He has declared war on the corruption that has rotted the empire to its core, and now the rot is coming for him. It had all begun in darkness 3 months earlier. On the last night of the year 192, the tyrant Commodus was finally dead, strangled in his bath by a wrestler. Rome breathed a collective sigh of relief, but in the pre-dawn hours, 2 of the chief conspirators, the Praetorian prefect Latus and the chamberlain Eclectus, made their way to a private home. Their destination, the residence of Publius Helvius Pertinax. At 66 years old, Pertinax was a man who had seen everything the empire had to offer. The son of a freed slave, he had risen through sheer force of will to become a general, a governor, a respected elder statesman. When the emperor's men arrived at his door in the dead of night, he assumed the worst. The historian Cassius Dio, who knew him, tells us he faced them with quiet resignation, certain they were assassins sent by Commodus. But they had not come to kill him. They had come to offer him the world. They hailed him as the new emperor. Pertinax did not rejoice. He hesitated. He knew the truth of the situation. The treasury was empty, the Senate was terrified, and the military was a law unto itself. He understood that the throne was not a prize, it was a poisoned chalice, but duty was the organizing principle of his life. Reluctantly he accepted. His first act as the chosen emperor was a compromise that must have tasted like ash in his mouth. He was taken to the Castra Praetoria, the formidable barracks of the guard. Their approval was not a formality, it was everything. The soldiers were wary, they had grown fat and powerful under Commodus. Who was this old-school disciplinarian? To win them over, Pertinax was forced to promise each man a massive bonus, a donative of 12,000 sesterces. It was a fortune, a sum he knew the bankrupt state could not possibly afford, but for now their greed was satisfied. They acclaimed him emperor. The next day, January 1st, 193, the Senate enthusiastically confirmed him. They were overjoyed to be rid of Commodus. In a gesture of respect, Pertinax revived the ancient republican title Princeps Senatus, first man of the Senate. For a fleeting moment, it seemed a new dawn was breaking over Rome, a return to the age of the good emperors, a restoration of honor and sanity. But the clock was already ticking. He had 87 days. Pertinax didn't waste a moment. His first target was the empty treasury. To refill it, he did something deeply symbolic. He held a vast public auction of all the decadent personal property of Commodus. Everything was sold off. Gaudy silk robes, jewel-encrusted swords, ivory chariots, exotic slaves kept for the tyrant's pleasure, even the gladiatorial weapons he had used to disgrace himself in the arena. It was a public exorcism of the previous reign's excess. And he didn't stop there. He launched a full-scale assault on the rot that had consumed the Roman state. He slashed the extravagant salaries of palace officials. He cracked down on powerful senators who had evaded their taxes. He cancelled the lavish games that had served as bread and circuses for the mob. He even introduced a land reform program, offering tax-free land to anyone willing to cultivate the thousands of abandoned farms across Italy. To the common people, these were the actions of a just and prudent ruler, but to the powerful they were a declaration of war. Every reform created a new enemy. The Senate praised him in public but grumbled in private about his fiscal demands. The palace officials, stripped of their unearned income, began to whisper in the shadows. Pertinax was trying to heal a sick patient, but the patient was fighting the cure at every turn. He was becoming a man alone, an island of integrity in an ocean of corruption. His most dangerous enemy, however, was the one he had both empowered and enraged, the Praetorian Guard. They thought they were getting a grateful puppet. Instead, they got a drill sergeant. Pertinax moved to restore the strict military discipline they had long forgotten. He curbed their special privileges, ended their abuses of the civilian population, and treated them not as kingmakers but as common soldiers. The breaking point came over money. After scraping together every last coin from the auction, Pertinax managed to pay the Praetorians half of their promised bonus. He told them the other half would have to wait until the state's finances were restored. To the guards, this was not a reasonable delay, it was a betrayal. It was an unforgivable insult from the man they had placed on the throne. They had sold the empire, and they expected to be paid in full. And fanning the flames of their resentment was the man who had started it all, the Praetorian prefect, Laetus. Laetus had likely hoped to be the true power behind an elderly emperor. He quickly discovered Pertinax was his own man. The emperor's reforms threatened Laetus's authority just as much as they threatened the guard's pay. According to Cassius Dio, Laetus began to secretly stoke dissent within the Praetorian camp, turning their frustration into a concrete plot. The man who had made Pertinax emperor now worked to unmake him. The first attempt on his life came in early March. While Pertinax was away at the port of Ostia, inspecting the city's vital grain shipments, a group of conspirators tried to declare a senator named Falco as the new emperor. The plot was clumsy, disorganized, and it quickly failed. When Pertinax returned, the Senate demanded Falco's execution for treason, but Pertinax refused. In a move of either remarkable mercy or fatal naivety, he pardoned the conspirator, declaring that no senator would be put to death during his reign. He may have thought this act of clemency would win him support. Instead, it made him look weak. It sent a clear message to his enemies: treason might go unpunished. While the ringleader was spared, several of the Praetorians involved in the plot were executed. This was the final straw. Laetus seized on the executions, twisting them into a lie. He convinced the remaining guards that Pertinax was planning to disband their entire unit and replace them with loyal legions from the provinces. Fear and greed merged into a single, deadly motive. The Praetorians decided they would not wait to be replaced, they would strike first. Which brings us back to March 28th, the final day. As the rogue cohort stormed towards the Palatine Hill, their prefect Laetus conspicuously vanished, leaving the emperor to his fate. Word of their advance spread like fire through the palace. Pertinax's courtiers panicked, urging him to flee or hide. But Pertinax refused. He was a former general who had faced down mutinies on the frontier. He believed, even now, that he could reason with them. He would face his men, as an emperor should. He sent an order to Laetus to confront the mutineers, never realizing his own prefect had betrayed him. The order went unanswered. Abandoned, Pertinax made his final choice. He would meet the soldiers himself, accompanied only by his loyal chamberlain, Eclectus. He stood his ground as the armed guardsmen burst into the hall. He was unarmed, dignified. According to Cassius Dio, he began to speak calmly. He reminded them of their oath, of their duty, of their honor, and for a heart-stopping moment it almost worked. Faced with the unarmed old man they had sworn to defend, some soldiers hesitated. They began to lower their weapons. But in that tense silence, a single soldier named Tausius lunged forward, breaking the spell. He screamed, "The soldiers have sent you this sword," and thrust his spear into the emperor's chest. The violence was instantaneous. The rest of the guards surged forward, stabbing and slashing. Pertinax, seeing all was lost, covered his head with his toga and fell under a flurry of blows. His brave chamberlain Eclectus fought back with a dagger before he too was cut down. The emperor who tried to clean up Rome lay dead in a pool of his own blood. The barbarity was not over. The soldiers decapitated the emperor, mounted his head on a spear, and paraded it through the streets of Rome, back to their camp. It was a grotesque trophy, a symbol of the complete and utter collapse of military discipline and Roman dignity. What happened next would be remembered as one of the most disgraceful episodes in Roman history. With the emperor murdered, the Praetorians decided to do something unprecedented. They decided to sell the empire. Two bidders emerged. The first was Pertinax's own father-in-law, Sulpicianus, who was already at the camp. The second was a wealthy and ambitious senator named Didius Julianus, who rushed to the barracks when he heard of the power vacuum. What followed was a horrifyingly absurd auction. Julianus stood at the foot of the rampart, shouting his bids up to the soldiers on the walls. Sulpicianus from inside would make his offer. Julianus from outside would raise it. The Roman Empire was for sale. Sulpicianus offered 20,000 sesterces to every soldier, but Julianus, determined to win, boldly raised the bid to 25,000, an amount equal to several years' salary. The deal was done. Didius Julianus had just bought the Roman Empire. The murder of Pertinax and the auction of the empire did not bring stability. It plunged Rome into immediate, violent chaos. The provincial armies were disgusted. Three powerful generals in Britain, Syria, and Pannonia each declared themselves emperor, sparking the bloody year of the five emperors. The general from Pannonia, a ruthless commander named Septimius Severus, acted most decisively. Declaring himself the avenger of Pertinax, he marched his legions on Rome. His first act was to deal with the kingmakers. He summoned the Praetorians, unarmed, to his camp, promising them a pardon. It was a trick. He had them surrounded, stripped of their armor and honors, and dishonorably discharged every last one. He banished them from coming within 100 miles of the city, and disbanded the old guard entirely. The brief, tragic reign of Pertinax is a stark lesson in the struggle between reform and corruption. He was a good man who tried to steer the empire back toward virtue, but the system was too sick to be healed, undone by the very greed he sought to control. Was he a naive idealist who moved too fast, or was the corruption in Rome so deep that any attempt at reform was doomed to end in violence? His story reminds us that in the high-stakes game of power, virtue is not always its own reward, and loyalty is often just a matter of price. If you enjoyed this story from the dark side of Roman politics, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more tales of intrigue and power. Let us know what you think about Pertinax in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and we'll see you in the next video.